Hi, my name is Bahar Shadpour. I'm with the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. I've been working on advancing the right to housing for over 10 years and looking forward to doing this video for you. So I want to speak to interjurisdictional collaboration and how we can increase this in Canada. A key barrier to implementing the right to adequate housing in Canada may be seen as a problem in our federalist system. This is what I like to call the game of hot potato. Our governments want to solve our housing issues, but they keep pointing at different levels of government and who may be responsible for those solutions. But it's important to move beyond this as a barrier and to find ways to use our federalist system to create long-term solutions. Because at the end of the day, to advance and implement the right to adequate housing is an obligation of all levels of government. Without one level, the solutions will not be sustainable. It's important to also note that there are other countries around the world that do not get bogged down by this perceived barrier and have created the conditions necessary to increase collaboration and cooperation. There are some key tools at our disposal to increase cooperation. These include the Interministerial Meeting on Human Rights, organized by the Continuing Committee of Officials on Human Rights to implement recommendations from UN bodies, bilateral agreements committing provinces to adopt plans to support the progressive realization of the right to adequate housing, and municipal implementation of the right to adequate housing through their strategies. For example, the City of Toronto has passed a 10-year housing strategy that is rights-based. Again, here we can use a rights-based approach because this approach is a whole of government one and an interjurisdictional approach. And in this way, our federal government needs to exercise national leadership to ensure cooperation of all orders of government is achieved. So let me give you an example of how this can be done. The federal government has signed bilateral agreements with all provinces and territories to provide the Canada Housing Benefit. This benefit is meant to help lower income tenant households to pay their rent so that they're not evicted from their homes into situations of housing precarity and worse yet, homelessness. But if the federal government just provides funds for the provinces to provide this benefit, and the provinces do not regulate the rent increases or build deeply affordable housing options, the federal government will just have to keep raising the funding for the benefit. This solution then becomes a temporary one. Rather than simply providing the funding, the federal government can take a leadership role to provide guidance and advice on the structural problems and solutions that may be needed so that this benefit can really go far. How can the federal government ensure that the provinces receiving this funding are regulating their rents so that a household receiving the benefit to help pay their, let's say, $1,000 rent for a one-bedroom isn't forced next year to pay $1,500 for the same unit and now in need of a bigger benefit from the government? Without taking a leadership role and increasing cooperation with the provinces and municipalities, the federal government will be unable to eliminate these systemic and structural barriers to our growing housing affordability crisis. Lastly, it's not just important for the federal government to work with the provinces, but they need to be a partner with the municipalities and regional governments, as well as local communities who are ready and able to advance their own right to housing. Local communities and municipalities are at the forefront of the housing challenges facing them. They need funding support, they need to build their capacities, and much more. In the City of Toronto, for instance, a group of diverse community-based organizations and housing advocates have come together to form a right to housing coalition. They were instrumental in pushing the municipal government of Toronto to adopt a rights-based 10-year housing strategy. They work closely with their communities to bring the voices and needs of people to the government, and they work closely with the City of Toronto to help them meet the housing challenges of their residents. These are the community-based models of collaboration that our federal government needs to support, and these are the community-based voices that can keep our governments accountable to advancing the right to housing in Canada. So I urge you to make sure that our government at all different levels are working together cooperatively, but even more importantly, they're bringing in community-based groups and advocates to raise those issues to the forefront of our policy and legal solutions.